10 million new unemployed just in the past 2 weeks ending March. These numbers are beyond the Great Depression. Yes, folks, we are worse now than the numbers seen in the Great Depression, and it's going to be worse. How bad will it get? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to talk about that and more. JJ here, you're watching Bull to the Bust. It is Thursday, April 2nd. Let me make sure I get that date right. All right, folks, well, here it is. Well, with 10 million now newly unemployed people in the past 2 weeks, even before this, we were beyond the Great Depression numbers as far as the surge in the number of people losing their job. This is historic. This is an absolutely insane time to be alive. Now, if you've been on this channel, you have been preparing for this. Did we know that it was going to be the virus? Nobody knew exactly, except for maybe a few people that likely were tipped off to this, or maybe people were involved in this. But either way, you know that we've been talking about let's try to be prepared for a worst case scenario. And this is a worst case scenario, but it could get worse. We're going to talk about the sickness that is spreading, the unpreparedness of so many Americans and how it's affecting everyday life, and food shortages and panic and fear. But with all that happening, you would have thought that the stock market would have taken even a bigger drop. Remember, we're only still down around 30% in most indexes, including the Dow Jones. And wouldn't you think that with Great Depression, numbers that are worse than the Great Depression, you'd be down a lot more than just 30-something percent? Oh, I wonder what's going on there. It's almost like there's a group of individuals that have unlimited amounts of money that they can use to keep the stock market propped up. Can you imagine? Is there a group out there like that? I can't think of anybody. Can you? All right, well, we all know about the market makers, the powers that be that run the politicians, that run the world. Basically, it's the banks. And we're also going to talk about today, it's a bank power grab. The banks are getting more power than ever. The Fed, they're essentially buying whatever they can buy. Any sort of debt, they're going to be nationalizing companies now. The Treasury is merging with the Fed, and that's going to make it even easier to pump out more debt and more control into society. And what's it going to be at the end? It's going to be more control handed to the banks and the politicians. Basically, they're one and the same. The banks and the politicians are the same thing, especially now with the merging of the Fed and the Treasury. So you have the two hands now coming together, fingers interlaced for a new level of control and power. Right? Never let a good crisis go to waste, and you can bet anytime there's a crisis, the government, the banks, they get more and more power. This is the name of the game. It's problem, reaction, solution. Get everyone into as much debt as possible. Get as many people as possible dependent on the system, living paycheck to paycheck. Make people think that it's normal, that this is how it's supposed to be, that banks are supposed to be able to create unlimited amounts of money, but yet charge you interest for borrowing something they create out of nothing, charge you late fees, charge you interest on the loans. And then finally, when something goes wrong in the economy or just with you individually, you lose a job, you get sick, you can't make your payments, they're going to take your home, they're going to take your car, and it's going to get a lot worse. Let's talk about the numbers here. Today, Dow Jones up over 2%. The same with the S&P. NASDAQ also up at 2%. Gold still not catching a very big bid, only up about 1.2% today. Oil still in the 20s there, $24.92 a barrel. Bitcoin catching a slight of a bid. Looks like it might be a safe haven still. I believe that's also a manipulated number at about 67.48 right now. So let's take a look at some news here. In just a matter of 2 weeks, the United States, we have wiped out nearly half of all of the jobs that were created or gained since the financial crisis. The financial crisis over 10 years ago, half of those jobs in that quote-unquote recovery over the past 10 years, gone in just 2 weeks. Let's go down here. This is about 10 million Americans now filed for unemployment in the final 2 weeks of March. 10 million. Now this goes on the numbers seen in the Great Depression. Let's take a look though at the financial crisis right about here on this chart. We see 2007, 2008, and that was just a fraction of what we're seeing now. This is a off the Richter scale, off of the charts, surge in unemployment. This is going to be absolutely devastating. I'm not sure if the country is ever going to recover from this. Now, if it were not for this cerveza bug, then it would have been not much longer until there would have been a collapse anyways. This just accelerated the collapse. But the problem is now everyone's going to blame this collapse on the cerveza bug instead of blaming the underlying problems or the underlying system that caused this bubble and this debt for so many people. Not just people, everybody's in debt. The nation's in debt. Countries are in debt around the globe. This is a global situation. Cities are in debt. States are in debt. All to, again, a group of individuals that can print money out of nothing. This is the biggest sham. It's the biggest sham in history, if you ask me. Right? This should be on the news every night. This should be the front page story, of course, along with the cerveza bug right now. But this should have been the top story for decades in the news, that this financial system, what it is doing to everyone. And sure, there's a group of people that benefit from this. The top 10% typically are doing pretty well, and probably even right now still doing pretty well. But this is going to be a life-changing event. It's going to change our country forever. Look at all the freedoms we have lost now. Every time there's a crisis, including this current event that continues to unfold, look at all the freedoms we are losing. Let me just read you some of the headlines regarding this cerveza bug. In some areas, paramedics are told not to bring heart attack patients into the ER because of the possible spread of the sickness. Right? In some areas, families are being told to distance themselves from each other inside their own homes. Residents in a city in Texas are faced with $1,000 fines for having their mouths uncovered. You need to have the face masks on. In California, people are getting cited for being out for non-essential reasons. Now, not everybody, of course. There's still people that are doing things. But they can stop you and give you a fine if they feel like you're out for a non-essential reason. Now, let's think about what would happen. What if the farm workers start getting sick? We're already seeing supply chain shortages, food shortages, panic buying. If the farmers start getting sick, what if this sickness continues to spread? How many people are we going to see starving, and how desperate are people going to get that don't have food? What are they going to start doing? Right? We already are seeing a lot of big cities and a lot of stores and businesses are boarding up. They are preparing for chaos. They are preparing for unrest and looting because they know what society has become. We've become a bunch of people that are dependent on handouts, dependent on the government, right? And this is a complete failure of government. One, to prepare for this. We're unprepared as a country for this type of outbreak. People were not warned financially before the event started unfolding here in the U.S. In fact, we have a leader, we have a president that was out there talking about how great the stock market is. Even after the stock market started dropping, he was telling people, oh, stocks look pretty good, everything's going to be fine. He severely underestimated the type of fear that is spreading across the nation. Right? So that's how you know that the bankers and the politicians are all one. The central bank, they have their puppets, their politicians. The politicians are going to be paid very, very well. And in fact, a lot of the politicians right now are on vacation. It's a paid vacation for Congress. Even though we are facing this level of threat in this country, they are on vacation. Just think about that. Now, of course, the stock market is down from the all-time highs, which were just about at 30,000 just a few months ago. We had almost caught that number there, 30,000. But even now that we're down far below that, we are still in a bubble. Even here at 21,000, even when it went down into the 18,000s in the Dow Jones, it was still in a bubble. Remember, there was a big, fat, ugly bubble even before the current president took office. He talked about it on the campaign trail. He was correct. He was correct at that time. The mistake he made was he came in, he took credit for inflating the bubble, and a lot of people got hurt. A lot of people had false confidence in the economy, in the stock market. And now all the people that got hurt, what I'm afraid of is they're still not going to blame the individuals that need to be blamed. Everything's blamed on this cerveza bug right now. Right? So there's people that are still going to believe everything was great, everything was fine up until this bug started spreading. Right? This is how brainwashed people are. That's why they call, the common name you hear is the sheeple. Right? The sheeple. How many times have we heard that? It's so true. So it's like, bah, greatest economy ever. Bah, stock market all-time highs. Bah, look at my 401k. Bah. All right, I'm not a very good sheep impersonator. The next thing that I think could happen is we could see a hack in the financial system. I hope not, but imagine what would people do if money just started disappearing out of people's accounts. Right? We've already seen brokerages go down and then come back up, thank goodness. What if they just start taking money out of people's 401k, out of people's checking accounts, their savings, their brokerage accounts? All they have to do is say it's a bug. Oh, it's a bug. It's a hack or a glitch. No one can ever prove it. Right? They could bring America completely into chaos in a matter of days if they were to pull off some stunt like that. Now, I'm not saying that any of this was done on purpose. I'm just saying that if there's a coincidence where something like that happens, just a coincidence, of course, a coincidence during an election year, during a time when so many people were starting to wake up to the powers that be, to the financial system, to the fraud and the crime that's being committed. Right, remember, before this came along, there were people taking it to the streets in many parts of the world. Hong Kong, Venezuela, over in France, right, Vietnam, people in the UK. We had the Brexit going on. Major things were happening. Right, but here in the US, this could be ground zero for the disaster and for the danger that's going to be unfolding. Let's take a look at this right here. This is a report out of The Guardian. A perfect storm. U.S. facing hunger crisis as demand for food banks soars. And this is the way it is now. And look at these increases in some areas. Let's bring up a chart here. In Phoenix, we have over a 300% increase in food demand from these food banks. Missouri, Alabama, Illinois, Ohio, Las Vegas, all with surging demand out of these food banks. And imagine again what we asked the question earlier. What if the farmers start getting sick? What if a lot of the truck drivers or most of the truck drivers start getting sick? Who's going to deliver the food? This is a problem, right? We've all been herded either in or around big cities because that's where the jobs are. When you have a fiat financial system, that's where the jobs are, in the city, because everyone can sit in an office and walking around doing all these service jobs. They can work at a store. Meanwhile, you see the farmers going bankrupt, getting their crops wiped out because of severe weather patterns. People getting their farms foreclosed because they can't pay the taxes. They can't keep up with the rising cost of living, the inflation that's being created by the lending, by the banking system. All right, everybody, hope you're well. I'm going to wrap this one up here. For my patrons, I just put out a video. Yes, I know the image came out kind of dark. It's only my third Patreon video. We talked about a few things there. $270 for my car registration fee. So for your Patreon, head on over to Patreon and check out that video. Talked about a lot of stuff there that I really don't talk about on the channel. So thank you for all those supporting me on Patreon. I'll put a link down below if you're interested, if you're not already a Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting my work. If you like what we talked about here, please support our work. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a comment. Tell me what you're thinking, what's happening in your area, how you think this is going to unfold with unemployment numbers surging now beyond the Great Depression, with food shortages and food banks seeing increased demand. The stock market still being propped up. It's still in a bubble. Why isn't it dropping farther? What about this manipulation? All right, they're pumping trillions of dollars into the system here just to try to keep the stock market from plummeting. And imagine on top of all this, if the stock market continues to go down, it very well could go down. Imagine if they quit manipulating it. They could pull the plug and watch this thing collapse. And there's going to be people losing the retirement they've saved up with, or they saved up for, sometimes for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, could be wiped out in an instant. What if there's something else that happens? What if there's a virus, quote unquote virus, that starts coming for your electronic digital currency out of your retirement and savings accounts, right? Right, it could get worse. Everybody, thanks for watching. Hope everyone is well. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your support. Bye for now.